You've all seen The Wizard of Oz, right? Do you remember the beginning of the movie when Miss Gulch, who later becomes the Wicked Witch, comes to take Toto away from Dorothy? Toto had bitten Miss Gulch's leg, and so Miss Gulch got an order from the sheriff to take Toto away. After a very heated conversation, Dorothy's aunt, Aunt Em, gets up and says to Miss Gulch, "For 23 years I've been dying to tell you what I thought of you. And now, well, being a Christian woman, I can't say it." Presumably, Aunt Em wanted to say something very nasty to Miss Gulch, but because she was a Christian, she couldn't bring herself to say it. There's a really important lesson contained in that line from The Wizard of Oz. When you're a Christian, there are certain things you can't do because of your faith, and there are other things that you must do because of your faith. People expect Christians to act differently. For example, people expect Christians to be kinder than the average non-Christian person. People expect Christians to love others, to volunteer, to do works of charity. People expect Christians to live lives of integrity, not to lie, cheat, or steal. There might be a lot of things we're tempted to do in life, but like Aunt Em, we say, "I'd love to do that, but I can't because I'm a Christian." Or there might be a lot of things we don't want to do in life, but like Aunt Em, we say, "I don't want to do that, but I must because I'm a Christian." Christians are supposed to stand out in a crowd for the way we go about living our lives. Now here's a point I want you to meditate on. One of the most important ways that we Christians are supposed to be different from other people is in the way we deal with death. Since the very beginning of our religion, Christians have been famous for the unique way in which they confront the reality of death. There have even been many people down through the centuries who have converted to the Christian faith simply because they were inspired by the way the Christians they knew dealt with death. In our second reading today, St. Paul tells us that Christians grieve differently than other people who have no hope. He says in his first letter to the Thessalonians, "We do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, about those who have fallen asleep, so that you may not grieve like the rest who have no hope." If you are a true Christian, people should notice something different about the way you cope with loss. One of the main ways that we Christians stand out in a crowd is by the hope that we exude when the people we love pass away. Now that raises a question. Does that mean that Christians aren't supposed to cry when people die? No, of course it doesn't mean that. There is nothing wrong with crying when someone you love dies. Even Jesus cried when Lazarus died. Did you know that the shortest verse in the entire Bible is 2 words in Greek and 3 words in English? "And Jesus wept" at the death of Lazarus. If Jesus cried when Lazarus died, knowing that he was about to raise him from the dead, then how could it be wrong for the rest of us to cry when the people we love die? I know of a priest who actually used to reprimand people when they cried at funerals. Anytime he saw someone crying at a funeral, he would say, "Stop crying. You're a Christian. Christians don't cry at funerals. You have to accept God's will." He would practically yell at people. Well, one day, that priest's mother died. Guess what he did? He cried. And he didn't just cry for a few minutes or even a few days. He locked himself in his room and he cried for weeks. You see, his problem was that he had never before experienced the death of someone he loved in his own real life. But the death of his mother changed him. After his mother died, he never again told anybody to stop crying at a funeral. You see, St. Paul doesn't tell us not to grieve. St. Paul tells us not to grieve like the rest who have no hope. And that's where the difference lies. It's okay to cry when people die. It's only human to experience grief, even intense grief. But as Christians, we have to do that with hope in our hearts and hope on our faces. True Christians are never supposed to be so devastated by death that they're not able to move on with life. True Christians are not supposed to fall into despair ever, or to break down into so many pieces that we can never be put back together again. A true Christian who loses a loved one would never say something like, "My life is over. I'll never be able to get beyond this." No. That would be grieving like people who have no hope. But Christians, by definition, are a people of hope. What is it that makes it possible for Christians to grieve with hope? It's our belief in heaven. Heaven is the game changer for us Christians. We Christians really believe in heaven. For us, heaven is not a fairy tale. It's not a nice idea that we teach to children to comfort them. We really believe that heaven exists, that it's a place of perfect happiness, that there are no tears, no emotional wounds, no pain, no misunderstandings, no sickness in heaven, just pure bliss. So when somebody we love dies, we're able to grieve with hope because we have hope that they're in heaven. And even if we suspect they're in purgatory, we still have hope because we know that our church teaches us that anybody who goes to purgatory eventually goes to heaven. So we know they're in heaven, and we know that someday, after our brief life is over, we're going to join them in heaven, if we die in the state of grace. When you really believe in the depth of your heart that your loved ones are in a better place and that you will be reunited with them there, you grieve in a totally different way than people who don't believe in life after death. When you believe that heaven is for real, it changes everything. Let me give you a little analogy to think about. Imagine for a moment that you and your family and your closest friends live way up in Siberia. It's freezing cold, dark, and barren. Life there is really hard, so one day you all decide to scrap your money together and move to an island in the Caribbean where it's always sunny, the water is crystal blue, and the breeze is always flowing through the palm trees. Since you spend all your money buying your new home in the Caribbean, you don't have any money to buy a plane ticket or even train tickets to get there. Instead, you have to walk for months all across Russia and Eastern and Western Europe, and then you have to board an ocean liner for a 10-day voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. Now imagine that a third of the way through your journey, someone comes up to your family and gives your sister, whom you deeply love, a ticket for a direct flight to that Caribbean island. She takes the ticket, and in 24 hours she's already there, sitting in a hammock, sipping a pina colada and enjoying the breeze. What would your reaction be? Well, you might be jealous, but probably, since you really love your sister, and since the journey ahead of you is so long and arduous, you're really going to miss her presence at your side. It was a lot easier to make the trip together, and her company made you forget how hard it was. But at the same time, you're not totally devastated because you know she's in a much happier place on that hammock, on that island, and you know that before not too long, you're going to be with her there too. That thought is enough to get you through the journey that you're now making without her. Well, that's exactly what it's like to lose someone on the difficult journey of life when you're a Christian. On the one hand, You're definitely sad not to have them physically by your side on the journey anymore. And that's perfectly understandable and perfectly okay. But on the other hand, you grieve with hope because you know that they're in a much happier place and that someday you too are going to be there with them. This month of November, which is the month of the faithful departed in the Catholic Church, and this year of unprecedented loss for so many people, is a great opportunity to examine how Christian we really are when it comes to our attitude toward death and dying. When you go through the awful experience of losing someone you love, do you grieve like those who have no hope, or do you grieve like a true Christian? Do you really believe in heaven? If so, is your faith in heaven deep enough that people actually notice a difference in the way you process your grief? Today we ask God in this Mass to increase our faith in heaven. For when you really have faith in heaven, then no matter how sad you may feel at the death of the ones you love, you'll always be able to grieve with hope. And when you grieve with hope, that's the day you are a true Christian.